Of all the portraits that hang in the grand corridors of the White House, there is one that is different. It doesn't depict a president or a celebrated general. It shows a woman beautiful and serene, with dark hair and thoughtful eyes. For 4 years, a bouquet of fresh flowers was placed beside it every single day, a silent daily ritual ordered by the president himself. This was the portrait of Ellen Arthur, the First Lady who never was. Her story is one of the great, quiet tragedies of the American presidency, a love story defined not by a shared life in the White House, but by a profound and haunting absence. History is filled with powerful women who stood beside powerful men, shaping policy and captivating a nation. But what happens when that woman is taken away just before her husband reaches the pinnacle of power? How does a man, suddenly thrust into the presidency, govern a country when his own world has been shattered? This is not a story about politics or policy. It is the story of a ghost in the White House. Not a literal one, but the ghost of a lost love. A presence so powerful that her memory may have changed the course of American history. It's a story about how the deepest private grief can forge the most unexpected public legacy. To understand the woman who would capture the heart of a future president, you have to travel back to a time and place that feels like a world away. Ellen Lewis Herndon was born in 1837 in Culpeper, Virginia. She was a daughter of the Old South, raised in a world of genteel manners, rolling hills, and a deep sense of family honor. Her family, the Herndons, were Virginia aristocracy, tracing their lineage back through generations of influential figures. Ellen, known to everyone as Nell, was raised to be a quintessential Southern belle, accomplished, graceful, and charming. She was educated in music and the arts, and she possessed a remarkable singing voice, a rich contralto that would, in time, captivate New York society. But her idyllic Southern childhood was built on a foundation of profound duty and sacrifice, a lesson she learned in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. Her father was Captain William Lewis Herndon, a celebrated officer in the United States Navy. He was a man of immense courage and integrity, a national hero known for his daring exploration of the Amazon River Valley. In 1857, when Nell was just 20 years old, Captain Herndon was commanding a mail steamer, the SS Central America, when it was caught in a monstrous hurricane off the coast of the Carolinas. The ship was battered, taking on water, and sinking fast. With calm resolve, Captain Herndon oversaw the evacuation of the women and children into the lifeboats. He saved over 150 lives, but as the ship began its final plunge, he refused to save himself. He went to his cabin, put on his full dress uniform, and stood on the deck, hand on the rail, as the ship went down. He became a symbol of naval valor, a man who chose honor over life. The news of his heroic death devastated the nation, but for his daughter Nell, the loss was immeasurable. It was a formative trauma, a defining event that instilled in her a deep understanding of duty, honor, and the terrible fragility of life. Her father's sacrifice also changed the course of her own life. With her family's finances uncertain, she and her mother moved north to New York City to live with relatives. It was a jarring transition, from the familiar comforts of Virginia to the bustling, energetic, and often ruthless world of Gilded Age New York. It was in this new, unfamiliar city that the grieving daughter of a Southern hero would meet a man who seemed to be her exact opposite, a shrewd, ambitious, and deeply political lawyer named Chester Alan Arthur. Chester Arthur was everything Nell Herndon was not. He was a quintessential Yankee, born in Vermont, the son of a passionate abolitionist preacher. He was a creature of New York City, a man who navigated the city's complex political landscape with ease and skill. By the time he met Nell in 1856, he was a rising star in the Republican Party, a key player in the powerful political machine run by Senator Roscoe Conkling. This was the world of backroom deals, patronage, and the spoils system, where loyalty was rewarded with powerful government jobs. Arthur was a master of this game, a pragmatist who understood power and how to wield it. Their meeting was a classic case of opposites attract. He was 29, a worldly political operator. She was 21, a refined and gentle Southern lady still in mourning for her heroic father. He was captivated by her beauty, her grace, and her magnificent singing voice. She, in turn, was drawn to his intelligence, his ambition, and his sophisticated charm. Despite their differing backgrounds, the son of an abolitionist and the daughter of a Virginia aristocrat from a slave-holding family, they fell deeply in love. Their courtship was a whirlwind romance set against the backdrop of a nation careening towards civil war. They married in 1859, a union that bridged the growing chasm between North and South. Their home on Lexington Avenue in New York City quickly became a center of social life. Nell, with her Southern charm and artistic sensibilities, was a brilliant hostess. She filled their home with fine art, music, and the most influential people of the day, politicians, artists, writers, and titans of industry. She was the elegant and cultured heart of their shared life, while Chester provided the power and the means. He adored her, showering her with lavish gifts and indulging her love of fashion and luxury. He was intensely proud of her, especially of her singing. She was a featured soloist at the Mendelssohn Glee Club and sang in the choir at St. John's Episcopal Church. Her voice was her gift, and she shared it generously, becoming a celebrated figure in New York's cultural scene. They built what appeared to be a perfect Gilded Age life. They had 2 children who survived to adulthood, Chester Allen Arthur Jr., born in 1864, and Ellen Nellie Arthur, born in 1871. But their domestic happiness was punctuated by a private tragedy that is often overlooked in the grand narrative of their lives. In 1863, they had their first son, William Lewis Herndon Arthur, named in honor of Nell's heroic father. He was, by all accounts, a bright and beloved child, the first fruit of their love, but at the tender age of 2, he died suddenly from a convulsive brain ailment. The loss was shattering. For any parent, the death of a child is an unspeakable sorrow, but for Nell, who had already lost her father in such a traumatic way, it was a wound that cut incredibly deep. It was a shared grief that bound her and Chester together, a secret pain they carried beneath the glittering surface of their public lives. As the years went on, Chester's political career soared. In 1871, President Ulysses S. Grant appointed him to the powerful and lucrative position of collector of the Port of New York. It was a job that made him one of the most influential Republicans in the country. He controlled thousands of jobs and vast sums of money, but the demands of the position were all-consuming. He was constantly entangled in political battles, meetings, and strategy sessions, often working late into the night. While Nell continued to reign as a society queen, she was also increasingly a political wife, left alone while her husband played the great game. There are hints in the historical record that their marriage, while founded on genuine love, felt the strain of his ambition. He was a man who enjoyed the company of other men, the cigars and brandy of late-night political clubs. She, in turn, maintained her own vibrant social and artistic life. Some historians have suggested that a distance may have been growing between them, the inevitable result of 2 lives moving in different demanding orbits. Yet the love and deep affection remained. He was still the man who adored her, and she was still the woman who was the center of his world. No one could have predicted how soon and how suddenly that world would come to an end. The winter of 1880 was a time of great political excitement. The Republican Party was preparing for a presidential election, and Chester Arthur, as a leader of the powerful stalwart faction, was deeply involved in the maneuvering. On the evening of January 10th, Nell, then 42 years old, was preparing to attend a benefit concert in New York City. It was a cold, wet night, but she was determined to go. Chester, however, was consumed by a political meeting and declined to accompany her. So she went without him, waiting for her carriage in the freezing rain. She returned home late that night, chilled to the bone. By the next morning, she had developed a severe cold. A doctor was called, but her condition worsened with terrifying speed. The cold turned into pneumonia, her lungs filling with fluid. She became delirious with fever. A frantic telegram was sent to Chester, who was in Albany for political business. The message was stark. His wife was dying. He chartered a special train and began a desperate, frantic race back to New York City. Through the night, the train thundered down the tracks, a race against time, a race against death. But he was too late. He arrived at their Lexington Avenue home in the early morning hours of January 12th. He ran up the stairs to their bedroom to find his beloved Nell unconscious. He sat by her bedside, holding her hand, but she never woke up. She died just a few hours later, without ever knowing he was there. Chester Arthur was utterly and completely destroyed. The man who was known for his cool, unflappable demeanor, the savvy political operator, was reduced to a state of profound, inconsolable grief. A friend who saw him shortly after Nell's death described him as prostrate with grief, unmanned and sobbing like a child. He had lost the great love of his life, and he was haunted by the fact that he hadn't been there with her on her final night. His political ambitions, which had seemed so important just days before, now felt like meaningless ashes. He had been playing politics while his wife was dying. It was a guilt that would torment him for the rest of his life. Her story, however, did not end with her last breath. In many ways, it was just beginning, living on in the profound, all-consuming grief of the man she left behind. Just 20 months after Nell's death, the unthinkable happened. On July 2nd, 1881, President James A. Garfield was shot by a disgruntled office seeker. For 80 agonizing days, the president lingered between life and death. When he finally succumbed to his injuries on September 19th, 1881, Vice President Chester A. Arthur became the 21st President of the United States. The man who took the oath of office was a changed man. He was a widower, a single father to 2 young children, and a man still shrouded in deep mourning. He entered the White House not with triumph, but with a heavy heart. One of his first acts was to ensure that Nell's memory would be a central part of his presidency. He brought her portrait with him, placing it in a prominent position, and gave the standing order for fresh flowers to be placed beside it every day. The White House, he insisted, would not be a place of dark mourning, but he would not allow his wife to be forgotten. He asked his younger sister, Mary Arthur McElroy, to serve as his official hostess, but he made it clear to everyone she was a beloved sister and a gracious stand-in, but she was not and could never be a replacement for his Nell. His most enduring tribute to her, however, was a private one, a testament to his faith and his unending love. He commissioned a magnificent stained glass window in her memory at St. John's Episcopal Church on Lafayette Square, just across from the White House. He hired the most celebrated artist of the Gilded Age, Louis Comfort Tiffany, to create it. The window depicts angels at the empty tomb, a scene of resurrection and the promise of eternal life. It was a message of hope from a man whose heart was broken. It is said that President Arthur would often walk across the square to the church at night, standing in the darkness and looking up at the window, a silent communion with the wife he had lost. It was in these quiet moments, in the presence of her memory, that the true impact of her life and her death began to shape his presidency. But was the story really that simple? Was their marriage the perfect, tragic romance that Chester Arthur's grief suggests? History is rarely so neat. The Gilded Age was a time of rigid social conventions, but also of private indiscretions. Chester Arthur, before and during his marriage, had a reputation as a man who greatly enjoyed the company of women. Rumors of affairs followed him throughout his political career. Some historians have argued that his all-consuming grief was fueled in part by his deep guilt over his own failings as a husband. Perhaps he wasn't just mourning the woman he had lost, but the husband he had failed to be. The greatest mystery and the source of the most intense historical debate lies in what he did just before his own death. In 1886, knowing he was dying of kidney disease, President Arthur hired a wagon to pull up to his home. He then proceeded to burn nearly all of his personal and official papers. Decades of correspondence, political records, and most importantly, all the letters he and Nell had ever written to each other were reduced to ash. Why would he do this? The act has baffled historians for over a century. The cynical view is that he was hiding a history of political corruption, destroying the evidence of the backroom deals and patronage that had defined his rise to power. But there is another, more personal interpretation. Perhaps he was protecting his privacy, shielding his life from the prying eyes of history. Or, most poignantly, perhaps he was protecting the memory of his wife. Maybe the letters were too sacred, the memories they contained too painful for anyone else to read. In burning their correspondence, he kept their love story for himself, leaving us with only the ghost of a romance, a story we can piece together but never fully know. It was the final defining act of a man who, after losing his wife, chose to live the rest of his life in her memory, and to take the heart of that memory with him to the grave. So what, then, is the ultimate significance of Ellen Arthur, this First Lady who never served? Her importance lies precisely in her absence. Her death created a void not only in her husband's heart, but in the White House itself. And it was this void that seems to have transformed the man who lived there. Chester Arthur came to the presidency with a terrible reputation. He was the gentleman boss, a product of the corrupt spoil system. His political allies were cronies and machine politicians. His ascension to the presidency was met with widespread dread. The New York Times wrote, "Arthur is about the last man who would be considered eligible for the position." People expected a disastrous, corrupt administration, but they were wrong. The Chester Arthur who became president was not the same man who had been a political boss. He seemed to be guided by a new, higher sense of purpose. He broke with his old political cronies, prosecuted members of his own party for corruption, and, in the most stunning reversal of his career, he championed civil service reform. He signed the Pendleton Act of 1883, a landmark piece of legislation that dismantled the very spoils system that had created him. It was a move that stunned his friends and enemies alike. It was an act of immense political courage, and it became the crowning achievement of his presidency. What caused this transformation? Many historians believe it was the profound shock and grief of losing Nell. The suddenness of her death and his own guilt-ridden role in it may have served as a powerful catalyst for change. Losing her may have forced him to confront his own mortality and to think about his legacy in a way he never had before. Perhaps he sought to become the man she would have been proud of, to live up to the standard of honor set by her heroic father. In the quiet solitude of the White House, with only her portrait for company, Chester Arthur the politician may have died, and Chester Arthur the statesman may have been born. Her ghost became his conscience. Her memory became his moral compass. In the end, Ellen Arthur left behind a legacy of quiet strength and understated compassion. It's a legacy that doesn't shout for attention. You have to lean in a little closer to hear its gentle but profound melody. She is not remembered for laws she passed or speeches she gave. She is remembered for the love she inspired in a president, a love so powerful that it reached beyond the grave. Her story is a poignant testament to the idea that the greatest influence is not always wielded in the halls of power, but in the private chambers of the human heart. Her spirit lives on, not in towering statues, but in the enduring beauty of a Tiffany window, in the daily ritual of flowers placed by a portrait, and in the surprising transformative legacy of a president who governed in the memory of his lost love. She was the first lady who never was, but she may have been one of the most consequential of them all.